be joined online by Michael Franzese, a former member of the Colombo Mafia family, and now Michael is doing a reformed person who's found God and is doing speeches all across the United States in relation to setting youngsters on the right track. Michael, first of all, I just want to ask you about the movie The Irishman that is out at the moment in relation to the Frankie the Irishman Sheeran. In relation to, you would have been there around that time, it would have happened in New York as well. Is there any real home truths that film in relation to Jimmy Hoffa's disappearance and the claims made by Frankie Sheeran?
Well, let me be clear about this. This was during my era in that life. Obviously, I know a lot of what went on, and it's going to be a great movie, no doubt about it. We got a great director and a great cast, and the story is good. But I can tell you firsthand, there's absolutely no truth to what the claim is in that movie that Sheeran was the actual shooter of Jimmy Hoffa.
Wow, incredible!
Nor was he the shooter of another one. He claimed to be one of the Joey Gallo shooters.
Yeah.
And that's absolutely false. I mean, that was my family. I know what went on there. And, like I said, people, they take these stories and they run with it and people believe it. But aside from that, like I said, it'll be a good movie because the movie's there to entertain, not really to inform.
Yeah, and I suppose, Michael, in relation to the Colombo family, there's a great interest here in Ireland in relation to the Italian mafia, because at the time you probably in New York and the States, you had probably the three contingents, the Italian mafia, the Irish sort of gangsters then, and the Russian sort of mobsters. And what struck me in relation to do my research was that in relation to the Italian mafia, if you were born Italian, that you could be a made sort of man, a mob boss. But there was an awful lot of Irish gangsters involved in the Italian mafia, and real people of real great powerful and real associates and real dangerous men.
Well, yes, in order to be to take the oath and become a made member of the Mafia, La Cosa Nostra here in America, your father must be Italian.
Okay.
Mom could be of another descent, but your father must be Italian. But yes, there was a very strong group of Irish mob guys in New York. They were called the Westies, and we did work with them at times. I had some personal contact with one of their main people, Jimmy Conlan, and we respected them. They certainly respected us, and we worked together at times for things that we've done. So there was a relationship. And also, of course, with the Russian mob, I had organized a lot of the Russian mobs in a big tax scheme that I had in the gas business. So we worked together at times. But make no mistake, during my era, it was the Italian mob, was La Cosa Nostra that really controlled not only New York, but really organized crime throughout the country.
Yeah, and I suppose, Michael, in relation to your involvement in the mafia, your father, Sonny, is a lifelong member, still alive today, and a sort of a legendary sort of figure in the mafia as well. And was it always you were a promising athlete growing up? I'm doing my research. A very good baseball player, very sort of intellectual as well, and you had probably the choice to go to college and pursue other interests, but when your father got incarcerated for being stitched up in relation to something he didn't do, that sort of forced your hand in relation to get involved in taking the oath.
Yeah, that's true. I wasn't originally destined to be part of this life. I was going to school. I was going to be a doctor. I was an athlete in school. My dad wanted me to stay legitimate. But then he was convicted on a bank robbery case where he allegedly masterminded a nationwide string of bank robberies. He was convicted and sentenced to 50 years in prison, which was essentially a death sentence for him. We thought he was 50 when he went in, and add 50 on top of that, it's a long time. So my dad, told me he was framed, he was innocent, and we needed to overturn that conviction. And as a result, he wanted me to become a member of his life. So he proposed me for membership back in 1971. and I then became a MADE member in 1975. I was 24 years old at the time.
Yeah, and
so that's how it started for me.
And Michael, you said you became a MADE member in 1975, and I'm doing my research in relation to you were called in for that meeting. 6 of you were called in. You took a blood oath, and dare I say it, are you the only person out of that 6 that are still alive today that joined on that night?
No, there were 6 of us that night that took the oath, and I'm the only one alive today. The other 5 were all murdered.
Wow.
We had a war. We had a war in our family in the early '90s, and quite honestly, that's not a life that's conducive to a long life. I mean, most people either die in prison or die in other ways. So it's to say that I'm fortunate to be out of it is an understatement.
Yeah, and I suppose, Michael, in relation to that, your sort of business intellect really showed in the Mafia as well, and in relation to the profits that you were reaping in on a weekly basis, in relation to 6 to 8 million a week, in relation to the $500 million of you were bringing in relation to defrauding the government out of gas as well, and you're the highest money maker in the Mafia boss outside of Al Capone, and when you're sort of bringing in those sort of profits and people are taking notice of you, is it, although you can really live the high life and the sort of Rolls Royce sort of life, it does bring a sort of bullseye on your back as well, and that must be a sort of worrying time for you and your family as well.
Well, yeah, it's kind of a double-edged sword, and I mean, I became a major target for the government. I was indicted several times. I had 2 federal racketeering cases. I had a number of state cases. A big case was brought on by the then U.S. Attorney in New York, Rudy Giuliani, and I was on trial for several months, and I was acquitted in that case, or I wouldn't be here today. He was going to give me 100 years. Wow. So, yeah, there was a bullseye on my back from the government. I became a major target. And then also on the street, when you're making that kind of money, people are looking at you. They're worried about power and influence. And so, you got to kind of walk a tightrope and be very, very careful, both on the street and obviously you got to watch what the government is looking at. So it's a tough life in that respect.
Yeah, and I suppose, Michael, was there any sort of, real near life death experiences for you that you felt you could have you mightn't have seen the following morning? Was there some really scary moments that sort of forced your hand to walk away from that life? And was there any sort of particular instance that stands out in your memory that you say, wow, I'm lucky to still be here? Well,
yes. I mean, everybody I know is either dead or in prison for the rest of their life. I saw in the mid-'80s when the government started to use the racketeering laws very effectively, and they really declared war on my lifestyle. I knew that somebody with my high profile, it was only a matter of time. And during that time, they weren't giving you 5 years and 10 years. They were giving you 50 years and 100 years with no parole, meaning you had to do 85% of your time. So I knew the life was in trouble. I saw a lot of guys becoming informants because they didn't want to do that kind of jail time. And I knew the life was in trouble. And I had, some personal incidents myself. So I thought at the time that, the best course for me would be to try to walk away. But, I would never cooperate with the government. I wasn't about, testifying against people. I never put anybody in prison. So, to walk away is pretty difficult. So, I mean, I had a lot of challenges in doing so. And obviously, there was a contract on my life because you're not allowed to walk away. You're not allowed to talk about the life. So I had several rough years. I did 8 years in prison. I took a plea to the government on this major racketeering case. So I had some challenges in walking away and turning my life around. But, at the end of the day, it's all been worthwhile.
Yeah, and Michael, you moved from New York all the way to the West Coast to California as such, and to put down a new sort of lifestyle again, and being a real sort of good entrepreneur and a business head that you had on you. Were you able to start, did you sort of watch your lifestyle? Were you able to start up businesses, or did you have to really live a life of sort of secrecy for a number of years before you could sort of relax and sort of live life once again?
Well, yeah, I knew I had to move out of New York. There was too many guys in New York, and I would have never made it. They would have got to me there. So I had to move away. I thought California was a safe place. The woman I married, and I've been married to now for 34 years, she was a California girl, so we moved out west. I had to change my whole lifestyle around. I mean, when I moved out, I went into prison right away, so I did 8 years in prison, and when I came home, I couldn't put a house in my name. I had no utilities in my name. I had to kind of, claw my way back. And fortunately, a lot of the things I learned on the street helped me in legitimate life. I created a speaking career for myself. I've written a number of books, and I have, things that I'm doing in the entertainment industry. So it's been a tough road, but I've been very fortunate, to be here where I am today. So, nothing is easy. Things, when you make a radical change in your life, you got to expect difficulties, and you got to just have the fortitude and the strength to go through it.
And the book you mentioned, I'll make you an offer you can't refuse. Sort of sitting down and putting sort of pen to paper and writing your sort of life story and dictating certain sort of issues. I know there's certain issues that you probably couldn't mention, but how sort of a challenging experience was that, given the sort of privacy nature of the mafia as well, to say, right, I'm going to write a book about some of my experiences?
Well, I was always encouraged to write books, and I've written 4. One of them is my life story, and then my business book really deals with, business on the street, what I've learned, and really business doing things the wrong way, and then coming out and doing things the right way legitimately. And a lot of things I learned on the street helped me later on. So, I've been fortunate. I've been successful at both times. So, and I put those principles, and I talk a lot about my former life, but I put those principles down in the book, and a lot of people have been helped by it. So, it continues to be read, and so it's making an impact around the world. So I've been fortunate in that regard also.
Yeah, and I suppose, Michael, your own sort of family, I know your relationship with your father is of real good note of late, and your family lifestyle, your own family, everything's going well. But there has been difficult times for you and your family in the past, and no doubt your brother sort of testified against your own father at one stage. So that must have been an awful sort of family dilemma to see your family being torn apart over certain issues like that.
Oh yeah, my family, meaning my mother, brothers and sisters, and my father. Look, it's an evil life, the mob life, and the reason I say that, I'm not calling the guys evil, but I don't know any family of any member of that life, including my own, that hasn't been totally destroyed. I had a sister that died of an overdose of drugs. My dad did 40 years in prison. My mom was 33 years without a husband. She died, of cancer several years ago. She was away from my father for 33 years. I had another sister that died young of cancer. My brother was a drug addict all his life. He was in the witness protection program. He testified against my father in the case. It's nothing but disruption and heartache, and every member's family that I know goes through the same thing. So any lifestyle that causes that for families has to be a bad and evil lifestyle. And I've been fortunate. I've been able to protect my wife and kids from that, by walking away. And that was a major consideration when I did walk away. I didn't want them to go through that. So, we still had our challenges. When you've got a contract on your life, and my wife was nervous every time I left the house, and we had to move several times, and then I did all that time in prison. So, it's a tough lifestyle for families to survive properly and prosper in. And especially today, because today the laws are against you. It's a different world. It wasn't like it was 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah, and I suppose, Michael, here in Ireland, we have, in relation to the ex-IRA members coming out telling their stories in relation to that sort of a faction who carried out awful atrocities in the north and stuff like that, and they're giving talks and reform sort of men and seeing the light. And you, in relation to you going around on speaking to the youth generation, the 16, the 17-year-olds who see the easy sort of the wrong way, but the easy way to a quick buck or a fancy sort of a lifestyle which sends them down the wrong track that they might pay for in time, but all they see is the glamour and the money straight on. How hard is it to try and dispel them of that sort of notions? Youngsters that come from sort of misfortunate backgrounds to say, listen, live life and do things the proper way.
Well, fortunately, it's a major part of what I do. I concentrate on our youth. I have a prison ministry. I visit a lot of juveniles. I go into prisons all across the country, actually across the world. I've been in 2 prisons in the United Kingdom.
Wow.
And, I deliver a message, and I have a lot of credibility because, I was there and I've done that. And I tell these young people, don't tell me you can't leave the gang life. I left the biggest gang in the world, and there is a way to do it. And I have a pretty powerful impact on them, and it's a major part of what I do. These young kids today, so many of them grow up in broken homes. They don't have a father figure. They're just not taught the right thing at an early stages in their life. And, as a result, they get on the street, they get around the wrong people, and before you know it, they're in jail or sometimes something worse. So I care a lot about kids. I have 7 kids of my own, so I really concentrate on the youth. And, just so you know, I'm going to be touring the United Kingdom in June of next year.
Wow, fantastic.
Ireland, England, and Scotland. And we're going on a month-long tour, and it's being arranged now. Looking forward to it. I've always wanted to visit Ireland. It's a beautiful country from what I hear, and I'm excited about it. This will be my 2nd or 3rd time in the United Kingdom, so hopefully I'll get to meet you and some of the people that are listening in right now. But, our young people today, we have to focus on them. And I see that a lot of them want to make a change. They just don't know how to do it. And you got to give them the help. You got to give them the guidance and the instruction. And a lot of them will listen and will save lives.
Yeah, and I suppose, Michael, I'm just going to finish off with a few sort of questions, and you might tell me if there's any sort of truth in this, but you were probably around some of the stories that are around that time. One story struck me particular in relation to the Westies, the Irish-American gang. There was supposed to be a meeting one time with Jimmy Conlan and Mickey Featherstone, meeting with Paul Castellani and the Italian mobsters over the death of an Italian loan shark. They sort of went in for a meeting, and they said if they weren't out within 2 hours, that they hit squad armed with rifles, a whole gang that were going to invade the place and shoot everyone up. Was there any sort of truth in that sort of sit down, or?
No, look, Mickey Featherstone went another way, as you know.
Yeah.
He was a pretty tough kid, but he had his issues, and he went another way. Jimmy Conlan, I like Jimmy a lot, but I don't. Everything is blown out of proportion. Trust me.
Yeah.
So there's some truth to that, but there's a lot of it that's not true.
Okay.
But I will say this personally, my personal relationship, I like Jimmy Conlan a lot. He was a good guy. He was stand up all the way. Unfortunately, he had a rough lifestyle too, and you know what the end story was with him.
Yeah.
A ton of prison time, but they were good. He was a good guy.
Yeah, and some of the other stories. Did your father actually date Marilyn Monroe for a while?
Yeah, that's what he said, and I believe him. It makes sense. Sometimes my dad exaggerates a little bit, but this Marilyn Monroe contact, I've heard that from more than one person. So yeah, he did. He had a relationship with her.
Yeah, and so many other stories. They say that the Italian mob had an involvement with the assassination of John F. K. Kennedy, who are obviously, the Kennedys have deep Irish connections and Irish history. The Kennedys relating back here to Ireland, and that the person that pulled the trigger in relation to John F. K. Kennedy had mob connections. Is there any truth in that?
Well, let me tell you, the United States government will never admit to that. They'll never admit that the mob got to a sitting president. But you can take this to the bank, my friend, that it was a mob-related setup and hit. No doubt about that.
Wow. And in relation to Robert Kennedy, did Robert Kennedy, in relation to his sort of fallout with the mob, and he started coming down hard on the mob, did that sort of cause the problems or escalate the problems for John F. K.?
Well, no doubt. I mean, Robert Kennedy, we hated him on the street because, there was a deal in place where if John Kennedy was helped to get elected, and he was big time, that certain favors were supposed to come in return, and that deal was made with Joe Kennedy, Robert and John's father. And Robert Kennedy totally turned the tables on that. He went after the mob, where J. Edgar Hoover wouldn't even acknowledge the existence of our lifestyle. Robert Kennedy did the opposite. And as a result, he put his brother in harm's way, and you can put two and two together, and that's the reason John Kennedy got hit.
And I suppose, Michael, in relation to the whole industry of sport, and boxing is such a huge thing here in Ireland. We have a massive tradition in relation to boxing. But boxing in the States in relation to the 70s and 80s, in relation to the big hitters like your Joe Frazier's, your George Foreman's, did the Italian Mafia have any sort of involvement in fights of that sort of magnitude?
Oh, absolutely.
Wow.
I myself had an interest in fighters, and a lot of deals were made during that time. Mob guys, we loved the boxing sport. We loved it. We had influence on it. There was fighters that we owned and influenced, and there was fights that were fixed during that time. No doubt about it. Not as much today, I'm going to be honest, but back in my day, for sure.
Wow. And if you look back on it now, Michael Franzese, in that sort of time, do you think that's a time that it will never be seen again? That sort of era of the sort of mafia. Do you think it's like previous sort of eras that have come and gone? That it was what it was, and there'll be no sort of revival of the mafia to that magnitude in decades to come.
No, I mean, the mob as it existed, during my time and, in the last century, I don't think you'll ever see that return. It's a different mindset today. And remember, the mob in America was born from those guys in Italy who carried this tradition with them here. Those old timers are gone now. They don't exist anymore. They don't exist here in the United States. Most all of them are dead and gone. The new guys don't think the same. It's a different tradition. The government, took away a lot of the strongholds that we had. I can tell you this, at one time, the mob in this country, we controlled and had tremendous influence, both politically, in business, and every other way. We controlled the unions. We controlled politicians. We had a tremendous amount of influence. Those days are gone, and you're not going to see that again, I believe. Certainly not in my lifetime, and I don't think it'll ever be anywhere near as powerful as it once was.
Yeah, and I suppose, lastly, Michael, before I let you go, when you see sort of hitmen from that time talking about their experiences, the likes of John Elite, Sammy Gravano, and people like that, and they're sort of coming out now, and they're sort of reliving their lives, but they're openly telling about the quasineri of relation to mafia, and they're making big financial rewards out of that. Does that sort of feel? Do you sort of feel disappointed in one sense, or do you feel that look, that generation is gone, that they can tell what they want to say now, and that lifestyle is gone now?
Well, it's disappointing for me to hear, the way guys talk today. They talk about murders so openly, and there's so many informants around that have flipped and have helped the government and have gotten deals for themselves and so on and so forth. But when they make excuses for their lifestyle, look, I make no excuse for the life I led. It was a conscious decision on my part. I spent over 20 some odd years in that life. I did a lot of things on the street. I just happen to be very fortunate at this point in time that, I'm out of it, and that's well behind me. But it does bother me when guys speak so openly about, murder and some of the things that they did, and they it's like a badge of honor for them. And I don't know. I don't appreciate that, and I wish some of these guys would stop. And most of these guys embellish their stories. There's one guy out there now that's claiming he killed 100 people. Yeah. I mean, how do you kill 100 people? You don't kill 100 people if you're fighting in a war. They're making it. It just doesn't make sense. But common people buy into this because they don't know the reality. They don't know the truth. But look, I don't know what to say. Life goes on, and people are going to say what they say. and they're going to be judged by what they say and what's true and what's not true. So, I guess in answer to your question, yes, it does disturb me a bit. It really does.
And lastly, Michael, we started with the Irishman, so we're going to finish with the Irishman. And back to the saying, you told me there's no truth in relation to Frankie Sheeran's claim that he shot Jimmy Hoffa in the back of the head and then he was cremated. So in relation to Jimmy Hoffa, do we know, I'm not going to say who killed him or not, but in relation to he died, is there any sort of way that he did die or where he might final resting place may be?
Well, let me tell you this. I've said this in interviews in the past, and it's funny that I just got approached last week by a big production company that wants to do a documentary on this with me, and I haven't decided to go forward yet or not, but that was my era.
Yeah.
And I can tell you this. I know the guy personally that ordered the murder. That came out of New York. It came out of New York. And I do know one of the shooters who's still alive.
Okay.
And it wasn't Sheerhan, I can tell you that. And they'll never find Hoffa's body. And I'll leave you with this. Where his body might be, it's very wet. And let's leave it at that.
On that note, Michael Franzese, an absolute honour to talk to you this weekend in relation to what is The Irishman just hitting our screens. So relevant to talk about the mafia, the Italian mafia. Thanks for giving us the insight in relation to the Irish Westies as well, giving your knowledge about that. Also clearing about things about boxing, which we have it's just an interest here in Ireland. Other things about John F.K. Kennedy, and such a fascinating interview. And Michael, no doubt, you'll once you arrive here in Ireland, people will flock to see you. And a real honour to talk to you, Michael Franzese, this evening.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm looking forward to it. I have a lot of people that that contact me from the United Kingdom, and I'm on Twitter and Facebook and website and all of that. So anybody wants to, say hello, I'm here, and I try to answer as many of messages that I get. So I look forward to it. Thank you for the interview, and maybe we'll do it again sometime.
Cheers, Michael. Take care.
Take care now. Bye bye.